talk about the logic coupler. The indication we got on the Versa was guidance and control system failure for each of the missiles that we checked. So this was a guidance system is part of the nose cone of the missile. It is an inertial guidance system, and of course it had to be calibrated, it had to be set properly. But this particular guidance system was upset on each of the missiles. Same failure mode on each of them. That made the possibility of this very remote due to the fact that all 10 couplers would have had this problem within a few seconds of each other. This is another gentleman we got a hold of, or he got a hold of us, again, as a result of my appearance on the Art Bell show. So I owe some gratitude to Art Bell. I don't know if any of you know who Art Bell is. You've probably heard of it. Robert Kubitsky was the project engineer for the Boeing investigation team. As a result of that telex that went out, they identified certain people that they wanted to look into this, and of course they wanted the Boeing team to look into it because Boeing had the support contract for the Minuteman missile. Well, they got together, they did their analysis, investigation, etc., and they found nothing significant to explain what had happened at Echo Flight. Meanwhile, they went to do their final report, and their boss came to them and said, the Air Force doesn't want a final report. Strange, because of course, after that telex, it says this is something of grave concern. We got to find out what happened here. And the Air Force says, no, we don't want a final report. And I'll go into the reasons why. But they were told that this was a UFO event, and again, this is the project engineer for Boeing. We'll talk about the University of Colorado study on UFOs. This is very pertinent to what happened in this case. It was set up and funded by the Air Force in 1966 as a result of Congressman Gerald Ford. Yeah, the same Gerald Ford who was later President of the United States. Was getting a lot of reports from his constituency of UFOs, and so he pressed Congress to have a hearing, at least, let's get the Air Force to look into this. So supposedly the Air Force capitulated and funded a study. The final report of this study was a whitewash. It was really intended to get USAF, Air Force, off the hook in investigating UFO reports. I'll go into that a little bit more. And Air Force, U.S. Air Force still uses the counter report as the main reason to dismiss UFO reports and not officially study them. A little bit about Dr. Edward Condon. In '43, he worked on the Manhattan Project, the first atom bomb project, as a physicist until he got on the wrong side of Oppenheimer, and he was fired over security questions. In 1946, he was appointed director of the National Bureau of Standards, which by then, after the war, was involved in nuclear weapons. And he hires a gentleman by the name of Hitler, who he worked with back at Westinghouse. I just remember that name. In 1949, and I've got a copy of this letter, J. Edgar Hoover writes a letter to the President Truman and says, by the way, this Edward Condon guy is a Soviet spy. He's a communist. Now, this was an official letter. I've got a copy of it. So in 1953, he officially loses his security clearance. In 1966, he amazingly gets his security clearance back, and then is awarded this UFO study. He is reinstated, and it turns out he's got to coordinate with an Air Force officer by the name of Colonel Hitler, the name you just heard. This is Dr. Roy Craig. He was the chief investigator for the county committee. He was informed of the Echo Oscar shutdowns by a gentleman by the name of Ray Fowler. Some of you know that name. He's written a couple of books. One was I can't remember now, but it was about a famous abduction case. But he was an investigator, a UFO investigator for NICAP, which was kind of a precursor of MUFON. And as such, he was asked by the county committee to help them out, identify some cases that they could look at. And so Ray Fowler also happened to be working for a company called Sylvania. And Sylvania had a contract with the Air Force, a Minuteman contract, a Minuteman project, electrical systems having to do with that. And so he had some people on station at Rendlesham Air Force Base when the Echo and Oscar shutdowns occurred. He heard from them that these were UFO related. Matter of fact, a couple of these guys had actually seen these objects. So he contacts Roy Craig. They meet in August of '67. He tells them all about it. He gives them he gives Craig names, phone numbers, where to get a hold of these guys, who to interview about the Echo Oscar shutdown, because obviously this might be important for their study. Craig visits Rendlesham Air Force Base in October. He's told by the Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel Chase, that he could not discuss it with him because it was a secret, ongoing investigation, and told to contact this Colonel Hitler, there's that name again, Colonel Hitler, about access to the secret report. Well, it turns out that Condon didn't want to have access to secret information. Craig didn't have access to secret information. The only person on the Condon committee who had access was Robert Lowe, who had written a letter before the investigation had ever started, stating that it was really their job to tell the public why the UFO business is nothing to worry about. So the Air Force report of investigation was withheld. The investigation on the Echo Oscar flights was withheld from the Condon study by this Colonel Hitler because Robert Lowe was given the excuse that probable cause of the Echo Oscar shutdowns was EMP, electromagnetic pulse, due to nuclear testing. Well, this is why I love James Klotz. He actually contacted the Department of Energy and got the complete schedule of nuclear tests during this time, and there were no nuclear tests anywhere near the time of these shutdowns. And even if there had been, it would have affected a lot more missiles if this was the case. Anyway, Craig agreed that he wouldn't investigate the Echo Oscar shutdowns, even though he had phone numbers and names. And by the way, I've got access to Craig's notes, the notes handwritten notes that he did while he was at Rendlesham. And actually they are archived at Texas A&M University, so anybody can read them. The final report on the Condon study did not include the Rendlesham shutdowns. This is just a quick rundown of what I call the cover-up. March 67 missiles go down. March 24th, report of adult incident. Chase sends a report to Condon. June 1967, Condon committee meets with Air Force Base UFO officers. And they just talk about basically, the 95%, when he said 95% that for which there were easy explanations, but they don't review any of the 5%. This is in writing, and then in July '67, Chase sends a letter to Important Technology Division, lying about the UFO connections and missile shutdown. So, and then October, Craig comes out to visit Colonel Chase Malmstrom and told to go away, and so he does. By the way, I've got a lot more detail. If you go to my website, spiralgalaxy.org, and read Back to Montana, I've written quite a few pages about this in detail. At any rate, the decision to discontinue UFO investigations. This is a fact sheet published the first time in, I think, December of 1969. And they, again, identify this study as the reason why the Air Force doesn't think it's important. And they make this statement: UFOs reported, investigated, and evaluated by the Air Force. There was never an indication of threat to our national security. Well, we lost 20 missiles within the span of 2 weeks. During the Cold War and during the Vietnam conflict. So if that's not national security related, I don't know what is. And this is still official Air Force policy. I'll talk about a few others here. Very briefly, Beale Air Force Base, California, 1959. A strategic air command base at the time. They had B-52s located there. A very reliable witness has come forward and told me that UFOs were seen over the base multiple times and were chased by Air Force jets. He saw them up close. Of course, the jets never caught the UFOs, but they seem to be interested in this particular base. Vandenberg Air Force Base, 1964. Bob Jacobs was a videographer, had a video camera, very advanced video camera, about 100 miles away, videotaped Atlas missile